So we have Les here in Loveland, Colorado, and he's a retired bricklayer. And Les, I'm going to start out by just a little bit of history about yourself. You went to Mesa College, is that correct? And
That's it.
and then you ended up going to Vietnam. And I heard you were a little precocious in Vietnam. You want to tell us about that?
I don't know how to explain it, but I was assigned with a few other guys, people my age, which we were 22 and 23 years old. When we were drafted into Vietnam, we weren't these 18, 19-year-old kids, but we were assigned into checking off inventory on the docks in Saigon, the things that were sent over to us, like in Connexes, vehicles, just to make sure everything was there and that we got what was supposed to be. But we were down there for a couple weeks or more, and we stayed down there. But I remember, along with these friends of mine, that there was, every time we sent stuff back to our compound, there was this Jeep, and it was setting off in a, kind of off by itself in a place. Don't know how to describe it very well, but anyway, all the time that we were down there, nobody came to get this Jeep. And the longer we were down there, and when we decided we had most of our stuff when we were going back to our compound, which was about 20 miles, I can't remember, 20, 30 miles north of Saigon, one of the guys said, "I wonder if anybody needs that Jeep. Why would it be sitting here that long?" And this other guy, a little bit nuts, he said, "Well, why don't we take it back with us? We'll protect it, we'll take care of it." And so, regardless, I mean, between that and a few beers, we convinced ourselves that we were doing the military a big service by taking it back to our compound, so that's what we did. And ironically, when we went back to the compound, we had a guy that was really close friends in the motor pool, and we said, "We just got this thing, and we're just gonna leave it here if that's okay." He said, "We don't care." He said, "You can do what you want to with it." So nobody claimed it, and nobody had nothing to do with that Jeep except us, and there was 4 of us. So whenever we wanted to go anywhere or do anything, we just got in that Jeep and went. And we filled up with gas there at the motor pool, and after a while it became almost funny because everybody in our company knew that we brought that Jeep back there. And sometimes they would say things like, "Hey, can we borrow your Jeep? We're going to go into Benoit." And that's the way it worked. It was so comical. And when I left Vietnam, nobody had claimed that Jeep yet. But I still communicated with some people after I was sent home who were still there. We wrote and did things. And finally, in one of the letters, somebody said they finally ran down this Jeep and wondered how it had gotten so misplaced, and there was never any problem. That was the thing I was concerned about, if somebody was going to get in trouble over doing this, and we knew better. But it took them forever to run down that Jeep and where it was. And according to some of the writing that I communicated with these friends, they did run it down, they got the Jeep, and they took it back where it was belonged.
Now, in Vietnam, I understand you tasted some pretty amazing delicacies. You went to Saigon and got yourself a steak, but what happened?
Well, the steak that we thought we were going to be getting wasn't quite what we expected, but I found out later, and I probably should have known better, but we didn't have meat or good food, or, I mean, we did really well. I have no complaints, but anyway, we did order a steak, and I remember it was in a place, it was the Americanized section of Vietnam, or Saigon, and it was a district called Cho Lan. But anyway, we were there, and we ordered a steak. It wasn't very good. It was chewy, and But it was different. And then come to find out it was a water buffalo. So,
And you also got to taste some amazing wild boar.
uh-huh. That wild boar got shot accidentally by some people on a patrol. And I think they panicked somewhat, but anyway, there was so much brush noise the way I remember it, and they just started firing, not knowing. Anyway, come to find out when it all was over, they had killed a wild boar. Well, they did take it back to our compound, and I remember coming back and seeing that thing strung up. I thought, no, well anyway, to end the story a little bit, the cooks skinned that thing out and butchered it somewhat, and I think it might have been 3 or 4 days later. It had to be soon because we didn't have freezers or anything, but they cooked it. The cooks did, along with whatever else we were eating, and anybody who wanted to could sample it. Well, everybody pretty much sampled a little bit of it, and it wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible, but it was just an experience.
Yeah. Well, and then you came back to the States and you tried out college again after that, and you went to CSU, and
Yeah.
it wasn't for you.
No, I just, I went back on the GI Bill. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I thought I could bide my time for a while and go to school up there. And when I realized it wasn't for me, I just bailed out and actually ended up with a construction company that I used to work for when I was in high school in the summer, and I needed to go to work doing something. And of course I've known them since I was 15 or 16, and they said, well, why don't you start yourself an apprenticeship as a bricklayer? And that's the story of my life. I did that.
Yeah. Well, for a while though, you left bricklaying and you went to work for Kodak. It was a little bit of a shock for you?
I didn't go to work for Kodak. I went to work at Kodak as a bricklayer.
Oh. Oh, okay.
And that's when Kodak first established herself, moving out here and over to Windsor. And that was one of the times when, as a bricklayer, that I ended up, the company I was working for, we started work at Windsor building Kodak. And gosh, it was a great job. I mean, it was all indoor work, and you never missed time when it was cold or hot or dry or nothing. And so in the beginning years for me, that was my lifesaver. I was married and had a house and things, and I was pretty well concerned about being able to provide for a family and livelihood. And it was the first time, that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. And so about 1970, there was an accident on site with some of your acquaintances.
Precast, if anybody knows what it looks like, I know everybody does, but that was what Kodak, and to this day, is still built out of. They're precast walls for the outside of the whole complex. That's why all your work, masonry or otherwise, is done inside. But they kept shipping precast in, and they leaned them up against A-frames. And there was a couple people that I knew who they were. Were having lunch one day, and it was after some big rains and over a period of time. But the ground gave way, and the precast fell on these two guys, and it just mashed them flat.
Wow. And then you were a leader you were working on the Holy Ghost high rise as a superintendent?
Oh, not necessarily but on it as a participants, you know. I mean, what? No, I wasn't the foreman on it necessarily, but I think I know what you're talking about it was a big high rise, and anytime you're ever around that kind of stuff, there's always accidents. But this was one that it was different. But there was this young man as a hod carrier working with us on a scaffold and a window mullion, and they're about 20 feet long. I don't know how huge and how much they weigh, gave loose from up above on the 29th floor. It broke loose and it fell down where we were working. And it didn't hit a single bricklayer, but it hit the scaffold and bounced around and hit this young man, a hod carrier, and it just almost disabled him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, didn't he broke his back and was just laying there in midair,
Well,
wasn't he?
He did. Well, I don't know that he broke his back necessarily, but it scared me. I mean, when the dust settled and everything, and I saw this kid, he had caught his ankle in the back of the scaffold, and he was hanging kind of upside down, and I went to try to, I knew he was bad, but I went to pick him up and try to unhook him, but I wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
So, but between everybody and everything, he got, and then just laid him down until paramedics and police and everything came. But I'm sure he ended up with muku money, settlements and stuff, just because that's the way jobs are, not that, but it was such a nice young man.
Yeah, and there was also an incident with a crane.
Oh, there were funny things happened, but the bad ones are some things, but this high rise was something to behold because it was so towering. But at this particular lunch hour, I was with some friends and we were eating lunch on probably about what would be the second or third floor at a mezzanine that kind of stuck out over Broadway Avenue in Denver. And these tower cranes, the only way that guy in the tower knows anything about what's going on is if the people on the ground talk to him, you know, with a two-way or whatever. In this particular lunch hour, there was an iron worker, the iron workers that was their particular time to start unloading their truck and doing different things. Everything was so scheduled, but anyway, these huge tower cranes, you gotta believe it. I don't know how much those headache balls weigh, but anyway, they lost communication, batteries may have run down or whatever, and where I was, I could even hear this guy on the ground hollering, stop, stop, stop. But this tower crane had swung out over Broadway and they didn't tell him no or nothing, but he kept letting that ball down, and it, ironically, an 18-wheeler was going down Broadway and it was a refrigeration unit. And he kept dropping the ball and it hit into the trailer, the front of the trailer, and it went right through the roof and landed on the bed of this 18-wheeler, and you could hear the crash. And that truck just kept trying to go, and it just bounced up and down, bounced up and down on the pavement. And I remember when the truck came to a halt, that driver, I don't know whether he thought the Third World War started, but he jumped out of that thing. He had no idea what fell from the sky. But he was dragging that headache ball down Broadway Avenue before it stopped. And luckily nobody was hurt. But it was funny after the fact. But, you know, it was just a lack of communication and different things. But that was one of the funniest things without anybody getting hurt that I've been around.
Now, there was a when you guys were finishing up the building, I understand that they had you on a rope dangling over the side and you were spraying down the building.
Not quite that way, but we worked late one night, and we were at the very top of the 43rd story out on an I-beam with a hose that pumped concrete through it, and it was something that needed to be done before they could go any further. And anyway, myself and a couple other guys did that.
Wow.
And I hated it.
Oh, I would too, for sure. Now, there was a bank in Fort Collins that you supervised, and this was actually, it won several awards, and it was very huge, wasn't it?
I think the architect on the job did win some sort of a national award for their engineering on it, which was great. But it was a big project, and it was one of the bigger projects that I've ever done all alone as the superintendent on it. And I have to say, it just almost drove me nuts. But it was almost a block square, and it encompassed a lot of buildings besides, the bank building. Also the architects on that job, they built an office of their own on that one square block thing to move into later on.
Nothing like having someone breathe down your neck.
And well, I got a lot of help from them. I became really good friends with the architects, and especially one guy in that architectural firm that helped me out more than any. I just can't believe him, how much of a friend and a pal he was. And if I had a problem and something I didn't understand, he helped me through it. And rather than, look at me like, why are you here if you don't know how to do it? And I learned a lot from the guy.
Now, one of the most beautiful things eye-wise that I've seen online that you were involved in was the face of the Eagle County Courthouse here in Colorado. And can you describe the face for us?
Well, like it says, it's a new courthouse for Eagle County. And they had money, anyway, they had eagles that sat out over the courthouse that were, they had everything, even in their chambers. We laid brick in there that described an eagle in the air. And all of this stuff was done. The outside things that were made of limestone came out of Indiana. They're famous for their limestone. And a lot of people don't know this, but I mean, limestone is quarried. Indiana is one of the famous places. They're quarries for limestone. But limestone is soft when it's quarried, when it comes out of the ground. But the longer that it's been exposed to air, the harder it gets. So consequently, it makes sense that when you have a plan, if you want somebody to carve an eagle out of limestone, you do it immediately after it gets out of the ground. You can work with it, but it doesn't take too long. It just gets harder and harder. So that's why people who put limestone anywhere in the United States, that's famous back there for the people in their quarries and what they can do. But our chambers, in the judges' chambers in the Eagle County Courthouse, it was a concave wall, and they supposedly had one of the people that was helped carve some things on Buckingham Palace in England come over and carve this eagle into some brick that were fresh and soft, just come out of a kiln, and he drew the pictures of a flying eagle in it. When it got done, him carving and stuff, I don't remember how long it had to sit, but all of those pieces were numbered, and us as bricklayers and everybody else involved, you built that concave wall by numbers.
Wow.
And it looked, and that eagle was, I know it was 20 feet up and down.
Holy.
And how long, I don't remember, but I have a lot of pictures of it. It's beautiful.
And then in 1966, I understand you were working on a fireplace in a motel.
96.
96? And it was a big fireplace, I assume?
Yeah, it was a beehive type, and they do some of that in Russia, but it was like a beehive. It was oval. It was a real tough thing to do. I'd never been even, I didn't know, but given time, you know, those things will set up, and their strength comes from pressure, outside pressure. The higher you get and the more you do, the stronger it gets. But we were in there one night at the end of the day, and anyway, I don't remember what happened, but maybe we were in there too soon and rummaging around too much. But anyway, we were in there cleaning up some stuff, and it caved in. Not totally, but enough that it trapped me inside.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you've had a pretty interesting career, and I know we've only skimmed the surface. A lot of people think of bricklaying and they think of houses and stuff like that, and you're just an interesting person, and I wanted to share this with people, so thank you very much. I appreciate it, Les.
Yep.